The title of this video is Integrity in designing charts and other visual design elements. Let's have a look at a picture of nutritional information at a supermarket. Are you somebody that actually reads the packet, that gets in the way in the supermarket aisle, reading the food label? Do you actually believe that what is written on the packet reflects what is inside the packet, and to what extent? Or, like many people, do you just pick up something based on its price or whether you like it and throw it into your trolley and move on? So integrity is the extent to which the information that's presented actually represents what you're talking about. You want labelling to be clear, detailed and thorough and fit for purpose. Eliminate any distortions that create ambiguity. What you're aiming for is the effect in the data to be proportionate in the graph. And this principle was one of the principles of Edward Tufte, who's a very famous Yale statistician who wrote a wonderful book on graphing called The Display of Quantitative Information. It's a beautiful book. I highly recommend it. Let's look at some distortion. Did the stock market crash? Well, it zipped up, zipped down, zipped up, and then seemed to roar down the page. But did it crash? Let's see a different graph. Hang on, what's going on there? It's exactly the same data. Let's go back and look again. What's happened? Well, the first graph on the left goes between 450 and 500. If you weren't paying attention, that's the effect that it demonstrates. But looking at the overall effect from 0 to 500, well, yes, it did dip down a bit further, but it's certainly not the precipitous fall that was previously displayed. This brings me to another factor identified by Tufte. This is called the lie factor. This is about the size of the effect in the visual divided by the size of the effect in the data. Are you actually seeing an accurate representation of what the data is trying to tell you, or are you misrepresenting the data? Another principle identified by Tufte was the data to ink ratio. How much ink are you using in your data, and how much is the total ink used in your graphic? Are you actually getting across the information with the minimal ink? Now, this mattered more in the days of publishing. These days, most things are published online, so there's very large amounts of storage space. Nevertheless, just going overboard with colours can be unnecessary. Let's have a look at some different ways that you can reduce the amount of ink used and still get across the same message. Here's an example of some box plots on the left. On the right, they've had the core information stripped out of them, but it's exactly the same information. It shows the center point, the edges of the boxes, and the extent of the outliers. So you're getting all that information without all of the heaviness, the density of the box plots. And it's actually a bit easier to read the one on the right. Another principle of chart design is around density. How much information are you actually trying to pack into your images? Most graphs can be shrunk without losing legibility or information, but there is generally a point beyond which you cannot shrink the graphs further without losing the information. Now, when you're highly constrained for space in an academic engineering paper, you want things to be as absolutely little as possible, because all real estate can be very valuable. Many of you will have not had the experience where you've had to cut really good content from papers to leave the great and regretted cutting. Sometimes you have to cut too far because the space is just too small. That's just the way it goes. So shrinking those graphs and getting the absolute maximum information in that minimum space can be really critical to your message. Have a look at these three graphs. The one on the left has been shrunk horizontally, and the one on the right has been shrunk vertically on the left, down below. You need to make those calls as to whether you can shrink in both dimensions, in one dimension. What are you really trying to communicate with that graph? Finally, in the fine print, there's other things that you can consider. Another thing to consider is cognitive load versus interaction cost. High density pages are sometimes referred to as busy or crowded. They give you a lot of information, but they may require more effort to actually get through. The page on the left is reasonably busy. The page on the right is very simple. You can scan that and know exactly what you need to do straight away. There's always a trade-off between how dense a page or display is and how much interaction cost or cognitive load that piece of information, that web page, that graphic, that chart is actually going to require. How much work does the reader need to do to actually get to the message that you want to get across? Let's look at some examples. Here's an example of a chart, and this chart can be simplified. What can be taken away? Let's take some things away and see what happens. Okay, I've taken away the grid. Did that help us? Did that hinder us? I don't think I've really lost anything by taking that away. Maybe some of the accuracy in pointing at particular bars in these columns. Let's take a bit more away. Okay, we lost the blue. Was the blue contributing anything at all? Possibly not. Let's keep going. Okay, I've lost the edge on the right. Well, the one on the left probably gives us enough to get by. Didn't need it anyway. Okay, now I've lost the grid on the left, and I've replaced the bars with white space that points all the way across. But I've cut a little bit too far. I still need that data to show us what the chart should be. What should be on the left axis, what should be underneath. I need to have that information, it's crucial. Now this chart gives me all of the information that I had in the original chart, but it's much simpler, and again, makes clever use of it.